How we doing, everybody? Even though that I know you're probably not doing too great if you're a Mets fan like me, as we are here post-mortem now. The New York Mets season has officially come to an end as they faltered yesterday 4-0 against the Miami Marlins. And now we all talk today to break down what is next for this New York Metropolitan team. Well, folks, we have plenty news to already get into on top of the video that I dropped a couple hours ago, so make sure to check it out after watching this one, everybody. And that had everything to do with what is going on currently with Pete Alonso, which we're going to expand on in tonight's live show, along with everything else that's happening when looking at the coaching, who's getting fired, who's staying. And folks, there are multiple pieces of that puzzle that are now going to be parted with from this Mets coaching staff that we amplified. From there, we also talked about Steve Cohen sharing his first remarks there to the public since the Mets season has officially come to an end. So check that all out today, tonight here. That being September 29, 2025. Thank you guys so much to everybody chiming in live at a replay. We have ourselves a big discussion because not only are we going to deep dive all the latest key remarks and takeaways from David Stearns' presser that he shared with the media just mere hours ago at the time of us doing this live show right here, right now, but we're going to extract what David Stearns had to say, what I personally agree with as a fan, and what you guys may agree or disagree with. Let's talk about it here in the live show. And to our replay viewers, let us know your questions, thoughts, concerns in the comments down below from your biggest takeaways from this David Stearns presser, and ultimately what is next for this Mets team now, as David shed light on what is going on with Carlos Mendoza, as yes, Mendy is not going anywhere, everybody. So we're going to talk about the pros and the potential cons that come with that decision, along with the latest on the polar bear and Pete Alonso and his future, as we have a lot to say on that front, and we'll continue to until we find out what is happening with him this offseason. We're also going to get into obviously a hot-button topic, and that is what are the Mets going to do when it comes to their decisions when looking at internal options, external options, other aspects of the coaching staff, and just other key nuggets that we saw bestowed from Mr. David Stearns today to the media, as he was as blunt as ever, and it was easily the most straightforward presser that I think we have seen from David Stearns yet as Mets president. So by no means does his words justify the actions that have happened, or, I mean, take away from the actions that happened, which were plenty poor decisions heading into the season and throughout the season. But accountability is something that I personally was looking for right away as a fan going into this presser, and that is something that David Stearns hit the nail on the head with immediately to begin his presser that I'm going to relay with each and every one of you just here in a second. Before I do exactly that, though, everybody, thank you guys kindly for hitting that like and subscribe on your way, and I really do appreciate it. I know that this might not be the most ideal time to some of you guys watching live right now, as the New York Jets are currently down 14 to the Miami Dolphins with 5 minutes left in the third between the two there in Miami. So if you're a Jets-Mets fan, if you're locked in the football game, it's okay. Hopefully you're here watching on replay as well. You said volume very low, Wardy. Okay, I'll double check that and make sure that we're all fine there. Thank you for letting me know, though. It might be something that has a quick fix. So let me go ahead and make sure that everything's set up here. Okay. Check 1, check 2, check 3, check 4. Let's go do this now. All right, guys. I think the volume's better now, everybody. You guys let me know. Volume good now? Apologies if my volume was low. Thank you guys for letting me know right away, too. I appreciate it. That way we can all make sure we're on the same level. My audio levels will naturally be different than what you're going to see from the clips and the remarks shared from David Stearns to the media today. That's out of my control. I apologize about that in advance, but I'll make sure that the audio levels are high, and that way they're fairly leveled for the most part as we break down these remarks, everybody. But hit those buttons on your way in, guys. We are just around 50 subs or so away now from 35,000 on the platform. So thank you guys for the continued support. It really does mean a lot. Help us get there, because we're going to be giving away a jersey to one lucky subscriber on the platform once we hit that latest milestone. Thank you so much for that, as well as checking out our amazing sponsors at SeatGeek that has you covered for all of your ticketing needs. The Mets season may have come to an end, but it doesn't mean that you need to come to an end when it comes to being entertained by sports, concerts, comedy shows, you name it. We're SeatGeek with over 70,000 active events to choose from, making them the #1 rated ticketing app in the game today for a reason. Has you covered for all things tickets. Utilize our promo code WARDY10, link down below in the description. That way you too get 10% off your next ticket purchase. And thank you guys for that, as well as Mantis Sleep. Check out Mantis Sleep and utilize our promo code WARDY. That way you will get 10% off your purchase there for the best sleep masks in all the game. Head over to mantisleep.com, promo code WARDY. Now, guys, let's talk about this. I got a lot to say, and I'm really honestly looking forward to getting into the deep dive on David Stearns' remarks. And the main reason for that is we've just obviously been wanting to hear what he had to say. Secondly, no matter how much you liked or disliked what we saw from David Stearns this season and maybe the lack of moves that he made, it's important to see what he has in mind now moving forward. If one, he is going to hold himself accountable, two, to what degree, and three, how is this going to shape the upcoming offseason for this Mets team? What will the level of aggression be by David Stearns? Will he stay as conservative as he has? Well, if there's anything that I think he himself took as a takeaway, it's to most certainly not move in that fashion, and we're going to expand as to why that is here in a second, everybody. But let's go ahead and let's see some key remarks here from David Stearns himself and go on from there. And folks, what we're going to do, I'm going to play the first handful of minutes of the actual presser that he had with the Mets today, and then from there we're going to go into some just key remarks that he made throughout the presser. The entire thing is noteworthy to listen to, so please make sure you do so in your free time whenever you get a chance to, separate from this. But I really want to highlight some key remarks he made along with his intro over the first 5 to 7 minutes, because I thought that was really important. I thought he hit the nail on the head with everything that maybe you were questioning a little bit going into this and what he had to say. Now, as I know, and as we all know, words mean little to nothing, if not nothing at all. It's what you do with your actions moving forward that will define you as not only the president of the organization, but how you're viewed by not only the media, but most certainly, most importantly, us, the fans. So I preface that going into this before anyone thinks that, oh, Wardy's gassing up David Stearns because he said all the right things. Both things can be true. You can have a really good-looking presser, say everything that you should be saying, but still not execute in the end a couple months from now. That's why what he does from now up until spring training is most important, to see if he can actually back up his words and put his money where his mouth is, so to speak. So without further ado, let's get into David Stearns' remarks here, everybody. Let's hear from Mets Pobo himself. How's he feeling now that the Mets season is officially over?
For showing up. I'll start out with a couple of quick thoughts here, and then obviously happy to answer any and all questions. Tremendously disappointing season, not nearly good enough. I think we all know that. We came into this year with, deservedly so, very high expectations, and we didn't come close to meeting them, and I'm keenly aware of that. I'm the architect of the team. I'm responsible for it. I understand how frustrated our fan base is. I understand how frustrated everyone in this building is today, everyone associated with the Mets. And we got to do better. And I'm committed to moving us forward and doing better. We'll have ample time here, I'm sure, to discuss the what and the why. I'll start off up top with a few of my overarching observations. From a roster construction perspective, on the run prevention side of the ball, we didn't do a good enough job of fortifying our team when we had injuries midseason. Clearly, that was a point in our season where, on the run prevention side of things, we went from a very good team to a team that wasn't good enough to maintain a sizable lead, not only in the division, but in the playoff chase. Our defense wasn't good enough, and that certainly contributed to our pitching challenges. And then offensively, we had a number of players who had really good years, but we failed to score the runs that we needed to score, despite those really good years. And so you add all that up, and you get to a team that underachieved greatly. We know that. I certainly know that. And we're going to work really hard to fix that going forward, learn from this, and do a heck of a lot better. So happy to answer any and all questions.
Top with Andy.
David, this would be a fair question to ask a number of people, but as you're the one that's here speaking to us right now, what could you have personally done differently to prevent these issues that you just described from happening?
Yeah, I mean, I either make or delegate every decision that's made here. So you point to a decision that didn't work out, and I'm responsible for it. And so, we have all the resources we need. We have tremendous ownership support. We have tremendous fan support. And clearly we had segments of our team that were not good enough. And that's on me.
And are you prepared to say that Carlos will definitely be the manager next year?
Yeah, Carlos is coming back next year.
So before we move on, because there's a lot to dissect from Stearns' presser today, and I really wanted to get in on the remarks that he had to state in regards to him holding himself accountable, and this decision being a direct impact, one goes in hand with the other, meaning that David Stearns knows where he was at fault heading into the season and during the season with his lack of proper moves, not being nearly as progressive as he could have been. We're going to show you himself says verbatim how looking back and now moving forward, he definitely says that he could have been more proactive, especially during the season when facing more pressing times with injuries and inconsistencies. He himself said that. So it's great to finally hear that, to have that be recognized, or he himself was at fault. He did not get into specifics because obviously he's not going to tell you exactly where he feels that he was at fault for not calling up Noah McLean, as soon as maybe he should have, or maybe trading for a veteran starter in the first half when everyone else and their mother went down with injury. The list goes on and on from there. So we're going to get into those remarks because we have plenty to say about that. And this is not necessarily to sell you guys on the notion that everything's going to be A-okay moving forward, but rather just clarifying what went wrong here, or he himself is at fault, and as someone, as we all know, is not going anywhere as team president, what he is expecting to do different moving forward, to get out of maybe the stubborn mentality that he himself may have had to a degree entering this year too as Mets president. Now, talking about Carlos Mendoza, why is he returning this Mets team? It goes in direct hand with what I've told you guys over the past couple weeks now, and I will reiterate such. You have one, the obvious factor. It's David Stearns' hire. Why is that important? Well, considering this is only Stearns' second year as Mets team president under Steve Cohen, and knowing that this is the first year that they're really facing any form or sense of pressure by the ownership group to get the job done after a failure of a season, all things considered, Carlos Mendoza is someone that David Stearns knows that was his decision to make to bring him in. And he is not going to be quick to cut the cord there when it was his own decision making, which means that he needs to look at himself first and realize where was he at fault, not necessarily with just the hire, but ultimately the position that he himself put Carlos Mendoza in. We all know it. You all know it. I know it most certainly. When you have the most pitchers ever utilized in a calendar season at 47 and counting by this Mets team, well, technically 46, but they called up Dylan Ross, and if he did go on to pitch, it would have been 47 and counting. No other team has ever done that. So to throw that wrench to Carlos Mendoza's way early in the season before we even got to the halfway mark of the year is a tall task to overcome. Then you add in all the other unfortunate scenarios that were out of control for Carlos Mendoza, headlined by just the rotation injuries. Not just Shamanai and Frankie Montas, but Kodai Senga, Griffin Canning, Tyler McGill. The list goes on and on from there. So understanding the circumstance of this was David Stearns' hire. He's going to give him a leash naturally because of it. And he also understands the factors as to why the Mets flopped as much as they did this year. Does that go without saying that, do we believe that he deserves to be held accountable, that being Mendoza? Yes, we all believe that. And I hope that Stearns believes that as well, because by quickly nipping in the butt that he is returning next season, this does, A, it eliminates the chatter that would have inevitably been happening in the media and with talking heads, including myself. He knows it, and everyone knows it here in the community. So shutting that down fast, I think, was important for everybody involved, knowing that they were going to be rolling with Mendy regardless of what happened this season. Secondly, it is a terrible organizational look, and I've been saying this for a while, and I'll say it again, to have a 4-manager span over 6 years under Steve Cohen as owner. Now, you can make all the justified reasons in the world as to why Mendy maybe should not be manager of this team. And I am right up there with you. I do not disagree in the slightest for the fans that say Carlos Mendoza had a piss poor season when it came to in-game management. I wholeheartedly agree. I think Mendy even flopped the final game yesterday by pulling Brooks Raley prematurely when he was your most reliable reliever outside of Edwin Diaz and a one on jam like he couldn't get out of his own mess. It was idiotic then. It's idiotic now. It was idiotic to bench and not play Jesse Winker as much as he could have in the NLCS against the Dodgers, but I digress. I can go on and on about certain in-game decisions, even going back to when he threw Eric Orsi into the fire in Pittsburgh last summer after Christian Scott got rocked, and it was Orsi's MLB debut. I felt terrible for Orsi, who then got dumped for nothing by the Mets to the Rays, and he had a really good season for Tampa as a reliever. Go figure. This all goes in hand with saying that Carlos Mendoza is far from perfect as a manager, but what he still is this Mets manager, and according to David Stearns, at least as of now, there has not been a lack of voice, apparently, in the clubhouse to suggest that Mendy himself was a problem. Now, as Andy Martino had reported, and as we broke down in a video earlier today, he did make note that several, changes of significance will be happening to this Mets coaching staff. So knowing that the Eric Chavez's, potentially the Jeremy Barnes's, looking at the question mark of a Jeremy Hefner, the certainty of a Mike Sarbaugh, and on from there, knowing that there's going to be a lot of turmoil with the coaching staff means that this is going to be yet another year where it's all up to David Stearns and his decisions. As he said, he has his hands on everything. But David did not have his hand on every aspect of this coaching staff. He okayed who stays and who leaves, but he did not hire Eric Chavez. He did not hire Jeremy Barnes. He did not hire Jeremy Hefner. He did not hire many aspects of this active coaching staff that is what is Carlos Mendoza working with. So that is another thing to bear in mind when we move forward on how to evaluate Mendy. It's hard to judge the inconsistencies to this Mets offense that still finished relatively well on paper and top 5 in baseball and Fangraphs as ones above replacement, but we know how Jekyll and Hyde they were. How much do you put the fault on Mendoza there versus the incompetence of, say, a Chavez and or Barnes? Those are things that David Stearns, too, weighs when making this decision as to if he's going to cut the cord with someone like Carlos Mendoza or not. So for anybody that thinks that this is a certainty that is, Carlos Mendoza was a lock to be parted with as soon as the season ended, I had a bridge to sell you then, I still do now. Would I like to see Carlos Mendoza parted with at the end of the season? I would have not been opposed to it. It was really hard to justify, in my opinion, bringing back Mendy after what was nothing short of a piss-poor in-game decision by him all year long. But, as I just stated, and I'll say it once more, you can only put so much blame on a manager for a lack of individual player performance that don't meet expectation because they don't live up to expectation. When there's a continuous effort by the manager to get the best out of the players and they just themselves cannot produce enough consistently because the player group, all in all, is not as good as what you were hoping it was going to be. And when we go back to roster construction, who made that happen? Yes, you guessed it, David Stearns. So say what you will about what Mendoza did wrong this season. I do not disagree with anyone whatsoever. He deserves rightful criticism. There should be a leash with Mendy as we look ahead into next season. And it's something that we should all bear in mind very well. That's still Mendoza's second year as a first-time manager. He still brought the Mets a winning season. Yes, a lot of things went wrong, and it was terrible when it comes to trying to meet expectations. But bearing in mind the lack of experience, what his role is in this market, what cards were dealt his way, you can only give so many justified reasons to say, hey, this is why he should be parted with. I think we saw enough when it came to in-game decision-making this year, but clearly that was not enough according to David Stearns as of now, which means what happens moving forward in 2026, what happens is if Carlos Mendoza looks like he's lost the clubhouse, lost the team, and they continued inconsistent ways while making proper adjustments on paper, at least heading in the season for this roster, then it's not going to be as much as to blame on Carlos Mendoza as it'll be equally to blame on David Stearns for taking that risk, seeing all the signs, and still riding with it for that to be the ultimate outcome a year from now. So just as much as Carlos Mendoza is now under a slight hot seat moving forward, the same can be said with David Stearns because this is his guy. So there is a reality where David could literally live with his guy and die with his guy in the sense of ending his tenure as president prematurely if things do not bode well over the next calendar season with Carlos Mendoza. So clock is now officially ticking with Mendy. That goes without saying. But knowing that he's staying in the organization is one less thing for the Mets to have to worry about in their offseason evaluation as well. Usually when teams go out of their way to part ways with managers heading into an offseason, they do this in ample time when it comes to prep. And what David had relayed is that the Mets did not really position themselves to do such a thing. They did not go through those normal processes because they never really took into great consideration that that was a decision that they were going to make. So Stearns has been very firm, as he has reiterated over the past calendar month in a podcast on the New York Post with John Heyman and Joel Sherman, that, you know, he believes in Mendy. He appreciates Mendy. He thinks Mendy's been doing a great job. And to Mendoza's credit, when you bear in mind all the cards that have been dealt his way this season with the countless endless injuries, yeah, he hasn't been dealt the easiest hand. And I'm not here to go to bat and to play devil's advocate for everything with Mendoza, because I myself ranted a lot about him, and I thought justifiably so. But I did not also believe that it was ever locked that he would be parted with for all the following reasons I just relayed your way. So everybody watching live and to our replay viewers as well, let me know in the comments down below, everybody. Do you agree or disagree with David Stearns' decision to stay with Carlos Mendoza for 2026 and beyond, barring changes? Webs Love, thank you for the donation. Mets fans want that Stearns gone, are poison. Bold take. I appreciate the donation nonetheless. Another one, $5 holla. Any fan that wants to fire a manager after one bad season is just an idiotic fan that's impossible to please. Can't fire people after one bad season. Yeah, I mean, we didn't even go on to mention what Mendoza did in year one for the Mets, helping this team get out of an 11-game below 500 rut in his first year as manager in a big market, mind you. Regardless of him coming from the Yankees organization, it was still very impressive nonetheless. And Mendoza struggled with his bullpen decisions last year as a first-year manager, but also went in hand with the bullpen that was dealt his way by David Stearns, who went very conservative with his decision-making. So, again, I see both sides of the coin here, which is why I don't hate the decision to keep Mendy, but I'm also not in love with the idea of running it back with him either. Because now that you're running it back with him, what does this mean? It falls more on the coaching staff surrounding him, as we just mentioned, as well as the player personnel. Now, to hear more key remarks, let's see what David Stearns has to say here, everybody. We're going to deep dive a couple of these, then we're going to respond to them and talk about the accountability aspect, learning moving forward, and the expectations for this offseason. From there, we're going to get into a bit on Alonso. We're going to talk about more aspects of really what is next for this Mets team this offseason. Shout out to every single one of you guys. Thank you guys kindly for hitting that like and subscribe button on your way. And if you haven't already, please do so and help us get to our short-term goal here of 250 likes for live and recurring viewers and 35,000 subscribers, as we're right around 50 or so away. Yes, I did see the news about Rocco Bochy as well as Bob Melvin today. And yes, Mendy did not get fired while all those others were parted with. That is true. But the reason why he wasn't parted with was because of all the reasons that I just relayed your way, and I'll continue to do so for anyone that's somehow, some way still confused by it.
David, just do you believe lack of leadership was an issue this season, either within the clubhouse or on the coaching staff?
I don't. I think we have leader.
Apologies for the lack of audio consistency. Like I said, guys, going from the actual live stream to clips of David Stearns talking, sometimes they fluctuate. So I apologize if you have to adjust your audio levels just a smidge.
Hey David, just do you believe lack of leadership was an issue this season, either within the clubhouse or on the coaching staff?
I don't. I think we have leaders in our clubhouse. I think we had leadership in our clubhouse. I do not think that was a problem.
You think then they should have been able to maximize the potential on the roster if there was leadership there?
I come at this of like, we need to create a better roster that fits together better. I think our players worked their tails off. I think they came to the park with the right attitude every single day. And it didn't work. And so I need to take a long, hard look at our.
Yeah, that's an important remark. Long, hard look at this roster. And we need to make a roster that's going to fit better together than what we got this year. I like the fact that everything that Stearns said in today's presser was telling that the Mets are going to have no qualms with parting ways with either guys who have been here for a while or guys who were here for a short time and they just did not work out. You can have all the proper pieces in the world on paper to build what is a good-looking roster, and it still is not going to necessarily amount to success if that group does not necessarily gel in the ways that you're hoping. They could all go every single day to the field, prepare properly, have fun conversations, good discourse, nothing negative in the clubhouse or on the field, but just not get any type of true aura going that I've been alluding to. And this is what brings me to my point. I think David learned this, unfortunately, the hard way. We know he learned it the hard way. We all did together. Is that when you do not have a proper feel as a collective group that they had last year with guys like Jose Iglesias and JD Martinez helping lean on in that regard, you have a team that lacks an identity and a team that just cannot find proper unity from their Fab Four to the veterans and the youngsters and the bottom half of the lineup, and obviously all the ever-changing aspects of what was a very frustrating pitching staff. Here's David Stearns in talks about specifically Kodai Senga.
Kodai, he's obviously had a couple injuries, tough injuries, but he's also had a couple mechanical issues where he couldn't come back and just wasn't himself. Can you rely on him to be that frontline starter next season, and how you evaluate what he does?
Look, Kodai's had 2 very inconsistent, challenging years in a row. We know it's in there. We know there's potential. We're going to do everything we can to help get it out of him. But no, can we put him in ink as making 30 starts next year? I think that would be foolish.
Kodai, he's obviously had a couple.
Now, the reason why I want to play the Kodai clip is because there's a lot of uncertainty as to what Senga's future will be in this organization. And I know that from this quote here, Kodai had 2 very inconsistent, challenging years in a row. We know it's in there. We know there's potential. We're going to do everything we can to get it out of him. I think the Mets, if they could find a suitor for Kodai that would make sense for them, I don't think that they would be overly opposed. However, knowing how inconsistent Kodai has been because of his lack of health the past couple seasons means he's a hard sell even with a fairly good-looking AAV of a contract for the potential upside. I think that potential upside is still something that the Mets want to tap into or at least attempt to without relying on him to be a guy that they need per se. And I think that's the route that makes most sense for this Mets team moving forward as we evaluate Kodai because, again, his value is at a low right now. You know it could be exponential if he goes and looks more like what he did in the first half this year before his injury. And if you can keep that man healthy or just be smart on your utilization of him, making sure maybe that he is kind of your 4-inning, 5-inning pitcher, but you know that heading into every start. And that's why you make sure that he has maybe a piggyback to back him up from the start of the season, which would be contrary to what the Mets did this year. That is something that has potential legs of actually working. And then if Senga does not work out in the end, you cut ties and you don't lose sleep over it because you did not need him to be the guy in your rotation the way you needed him to be the guy heading into this season along with Sean Manaea. 2 things that were far from reality. Nick with a $10 donation says, Jeremy Hefner was held in such high regard the first part of the season when our staff was leading the league. Do you think he's still the right man for the job in your opinion? I don't think Hefner has been much of a problem. And the reason why I say that is when you look at what the glaring issue was for this Mets pitching staff this year, it was far more on lack of health than anything else. Sean Manaea never got his season going, as David Stearns said verbatim this year, because of the oblique injury and then the loose body in his elbow. He was never able to get in a groove, and it made plenty of reason as to why that was the case. When you look at Kodai Senga, he said he was really never able to get his body right and comfortable after his latest injury this season. Makes sense why he wasn't performing. Frankie Montas was bad from the start because he was never healthy. You see the connection, everybody? How many starters this year fell off just for the sake of falling off? There's only one starter that really falls in that regard, and that's David Peterson. But David Peterson, why did he fall off? It went in hand with fatigue, as Stearns said himself today. And as we knew, because he pitched to a season high 168 innings, which, by the way, I was pretty much on the money with because I predicted heading into the season, and I'll expand on these with Evan Roberts in a future segment with him, either on his platform or mine, because we did a preseason show together on his Rico, and I predicted that David Pearson would lead the Mets in innings pitched this year with 170, and he got just under, so I was really, really close. So at least I got that right. I got actually a solid amount of things right that I'll expand on as we do that in future content from this one. But the point stands, when you look at the aspects of this rotation and you look at what the Mets need moving forward, you know, I think there's still a world for someone like Kodai Senga to be a part of it without him necessarily needing to be viewed at all in the same light as we were still trying to view him heading into this season, which leads me to my point. Jeremy Hefner is someone where I don't know exactly how much blame you can put on him. The Mets have valued him really highly in the organization since he's arrived here 3.5 years ago or so. Maybe is now the time to make a change there for the sake of everybody. It very well could be. There's a possibility where they just completely cut ties with him. They get rid of Desi Driscoll after he just got hired this past offseason, among others, when these guys were still highly regarded. From everything that I've heard organizationally, as someone who's spoken to people that are connected in the Mets' actual coaching staff when looking at pitching, when looking at the lab, I can tell you that Jeremy has been viewed as nothing but in high regard, not only from the players, but from the people that he actively works with. So take that with however which way you want. But in my opinion, I think that's telling of someone who, unless he wants to leave, is probably not going to be leaving yet, at least. So we'll see what happens for sure, though. It's a good question, no doubt. And we're going to get to more remarks regarding David Stearns here in a second. Before we do, though, Mario has a $5 donation. And Mario says, decide not to wear Mets stuff till the Yanks are eliminated. Wearing my Rangers and Mario Mariners. That's a cool hat, Mario Mariners. Also, potential fan Q&A thoughts stream. Yeah, we're going to be doing a stream like that very soon for our members. So be on the lookout for that because the month is coming to a close. So we're actually going to be doing that over the next calendar week. Be on the lookout for that for all of our members, everybody. Every single month, we do a members-only live show of a complete Q&A segment of around an hour or so of answering whatever comments, questions, or concerns you guys got for me. We do call-in segments as well. And we will do call-in segments throughout the course of the offseason as well, too. So make sure you guys are tapped in for that. Hi, Pat. Happy to have you in here. James Carroll, my guy, great member. Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate that. Why can't Vientos, Alvarez, and Mauricio hit a curveball? Because you have Carlos Mendoza telling them to go fastball hunting, and that's that. That's why. Rockman with a $5 donation says, Wardy, how ready is Ryan Clifford for the MLB? Could he take Alonso's place? He could take Alonso's place, but I do think that there will be an adjustment period. And I think if he started the year as a Mets first baseman, it would be not great. I do think Ryan Clifford needs a bit more seasoning in AAA, even though he did honestly make a fairly quick transition to perform more in hand with how his career norms are. So do I think Clifford will make his Major League debut next season? Yes, I do. Do I think it'll be as a Pete Alonso replacement? I can't say I view that as a certainty right now, but it is something to bear in mind as we move forward. David Stearns on Pete Alonso.
You've parked a little bit on just needing to improve the defense. Your top free agent is a bat first baseman. Just what is your interest in bringing back Pete Alonso, and does that kind of complicate it a little bit?
Yeah, look, Pete is a great Met. He had a fantastic year. I said this last year, and it worked out. Like, I'd love to have Pete back, and we'll see where the offseason goes.
You've parked a little bit on just needing to improve the defense. Your top free agent is a bat first baseman. Just what is your interest in bringing back Pete Alonso, and does that kind of complicate it a little bit?
Yeah, look, Pete is a great Met. He had a fantastic year. I said this last year, and it worked out. Like, I'd love to have Pete back, and we'll see where the offseason goes.
All right, guys. So as you'd expect, normal verbatim answer from David Stearns, just like what he said last year. And yes, of course, thank you so much for the kind words and the support. I really appreciate it. But yeah, to say it, Pete Alonso is going to return as a lock. Far from it. I think I'm going to go out and say it now. I think there's a greater reality that Alonso is not a New York Met for 2026 now than what was the case a year ago because of, one, Alonso doesn't have a QO that'll be attached to him this offseason because the Mets can't do it another year in a row like they did last year. And 2, he will be getting more length in his contract more than likely because of that to a wider variety of suitors. So it's really going to be more on Alonso's willingness to want to return to this Mets team than I think it will be on how far the Mets need to go. Because we know that the Mets are not going to bend over backwards to bring Alonso back on a long-term deal. It's going to be the same same situation in the last offseason in that regard. But differently from what we saw last offseason, this is more than likely not going to drag out as long as it did with Pete. Because a key factor as to why Alonso's negotiations dragged out last year is because of how much they dried up throughout the course of the offseason, because no team wanted to bite on Alonso with that QO attached. It really bothered them, and I don't blame them. Losing a draft pick just for signing a player is kind of ridiculous, and teams take full advantage of it by basically putting this little protector around the player. It's like a force field that you can't really go through. So even though that they're a free agent, in a lot of ways, they're really a restricted free agent. You know, I view it as like an RFA, as if you're an RFA in the NHL. An RFA basically just means that team gets like first dibs and, you know, has like full say in trying to get negotiations going before moving forward on considering another team to get a chance to speak to that player. It's basically what it does for the Mets. It gives them that advantage. And them not having that is something that I think may come back to bite them this offseason if they play conservative to the same degree that they did last year with Alonso. Now, if Alonso's willing to sign another 2-3 year deal, but have opt-outs after every year, but it's player opt-outs like what they've been, knowing he has full control, that seems great for us. But for Alonso, maybe he really wants the certainty of length in a contract. If that's the case, that's where we're going to have our biggest issues with Pete Alonso returning that we will talk endlessly about this offseason. I'm already going to call it now. We're going to have, at minimum, 35 to 40 pieces of content regarding Pete Alonso this offseason. That feels like it's going to be more, too. I feel like I'm going very conservative on that, because that's just the nature of the game when it comes to Alonso sweepstakes. You know there's going to be so much that happens in that regard. So much. $10 holla. Thank you so much, my friend. A. Lavelle, what's up, Wari? Just wants to say thank you for all your hard work, wisdom, and dedication in creating a safe space for Mets fans. God bless you and your family. Thank you so much for your continued support throughout the years, my friend. You have been here for a long time now, and I've always appreciated every single time I see you, your comments, and your donations. So thank you so much. God bless to you and yours as well. Let's go Mets, my friend. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Really do appreciate that. Not Pete Alonso. David Stearns taking ownership, accountability for the Mets' woes here in 2025. Listen up.
And just on the defensive side of run prevention, obviously you look at the Brewers, you see a team that's very versatile, athletic, catches the ball. That's clearly a priority of yours. You inherited a roster here like anyone would coming into a job. How long do you think it takes roughly? How many years before you can meld a roster that is more in your image, in particular defensively?
Yeah, look, I think I take ownership over this roster. I've been here now for 2 years. That's plenty of time to shape a roster, to meld a roster, and so yeah, I take ownership over the players that are here. As we continue to develop our players, that is naturally going to change the composition of our position player grouping. And yeah, I'd say holistically we need to get better defensively.
So good to hear him take accountability there. As we know, David Stearns prides himself on great defense, which I'm sure bothered him to no end this year to see the incompetence that the Mets had in center. You know, between Tyrone Taylor's great defense, but lackadaisical bat, to Cedric Mullins looking like a net negative in either area, in which he himself, Stearns, stated with the media today, including missing on some trade deadline acquisitions, you know, that they just did not work out. And to see Mark Vientos continue to get played at third base when he's just not a third baseman. To see the unfortunate mishaps, especially at times in left field when we saw very few and far in between Jesse Winker playing his one-and-done game in the outfield for the Mets, Starling Marte at times, even though Marte didn't look like a big liability this year. I'll give him credit for that. There were just a lot of things that were messy at times. Even Lindor had his moments this year in the infield where he just was not as sharp as we expect him to be. So it's good to recognize the defensive woes, but that's something they really need to clean up because the defense did cost the Mets more games than it should ever cost them throughout a course of a season. And we saw firsthand multiple games the Mets lose due to just, pardon my French, dog shit defense. And that itself needs to change. And Stearns, who sees his former team thrive when he himself built a lot of that current ball club for the Milwaukee Brewers, I'm sure he has a frustration, but a determination to get this team right in that regard heading into next season. Peter, thank you so much for the donation. Let's see here. Thank you so much. We got 2 different Peters with donations. How funny timing. Wow. Thank you guys so much. I will get to both your donations here shortly, everybody. Hang tight. I will get to them as we continue to break down more comments from David Stearns. David Stearns when asked how he judges the core of this Mets team.
Now, this team, regular season-wise, is 8 games over 500 in the last 3 years, with a lot of highs, a lot of lows. How do you judge the ceiling for this core?
How do I judge? I'm sorry.
The ceiling for the core players you've got.
We have very good to elite core players who at times have played at a very high level. And a year ago had a very good season together. And so I think the ceiling remains high.
Now, this team, regular season-wise, is 8.
This core, though, the immediate core 4, the Fab 4, we know no one's going anywhere besides potentially Alonso. Because Nemo's contract, Soto, Lindor, we don't even need to have that debate. It ain't going to happen, regardless of how you feel about it. But as we get into everyone else, floodgates are kind of open here. They're most certainly open. Yeah, my thoughts on any fan saying to trade Lindor is you can go ahead and yap about that, but that's all you're going to do. Literally.
80 innings and
David Stearns talking about the Mets rotation, which most certainly was their most glaring hole this season.
David, understood that every team would love to have 4 or 5 starters who throw 180 innings and stay healthy all year long and pitch well. But from an organizational standpoint, philosophy, from what you guys can build or control, coming off of this, do you feel like you maybe need to ask more of your starters in terms of build a staff that you can ask more of and ask more of them to get deeper in games rather than be quick to protect them or pull them for relievers?
We need more innings out of our starting staff. There's no question about that. I think, we were on the edge for the first 2.5 months this year where we were getting 5+ innings per start pretty consistently. And that worked because it was happening every night. The minute you then get your 2 1/3 innings start, you get into trouble. And so that got us into trouble this year when we stopped getting the consistent 5+ inning starts, and occasionally there was the really short start, and then the next start was 5 1/3 innings. That gets you into trouble.
Yes, David, we need guys who can give us innings. And what do we need? What we really need, and I think this goes without saying, we need an ace. We need a true stopper to pair with McClain in this rotation. While we think there's endless upside with Jonathan and Owen McClain, in which I don't know if you guys know, I'll reiterate in content tomorrow, but I'll say it once more here. Noel McClain was named Minor League Baseball Breakout Pitcher of the Year. Jonathan was named Minor League Baseball Pitcher of the Year. So we know the upside is endless with these guys. McClain's already showed at the major league level. Jonathan has all the potential in the world. Pairton with Christian Scott, who I'm really excited to see perform. Christian Scott's going to give us a full season next year, everybody. I don't think you guys are ready for that because you're worried about, he gave up a meatball every start he had. I'm like, yeah, he did, but he also pitched with a partially torn UCL for north of 2 years. that was him not at his best. I'm excited for Christian Scott, who was the most heralded pitching prospect at the time I was doing things in the minor leagues that no one else is doing better than, outside of Paul Skeens, literally nobody in the minor leagues over the time that he was there. You know, a teammate of Brandon Sproats during their time at Florida, another Florida man to potentially pair with Pete Alonso for next season as well, too. I'm excited for him. Same way I'm excited for Brandon Sproat in a full season as long as he's not traded, because that's another interesting aspect to evaluate as we go into this offseason. There is a world where the Mets do trade one or multiple of their younger controllable starters for a more certainty of a starter, an ace that's controllable now. And no, I'm not saying that's a lock that you're going to trade a Sproat a ton or anything like that. All I'm saying is the Mets will evaluate every single opportunity on the table. And teams will become barking, not only for those guys, but for the guys waiting in the wings, like Jonathan Santucci, RJ Gordon, Jack Weniger, Zach Thornton. The list goes on from there. The Mets do have an abundance of riches in the minor leagues with pitching depth, and they will probably tap into more on that pitching depth to get immediate pitching help for now heading into the next season. So, as David Stearns reiterated time and time again, I'll say here as well, he has made it known the importance for the Mets to turn out their own great pitching talent, because that's how they're going to have continued sustained success. It's greater that way versus banking on uncertainties in the free agent market or guys that you're way overspending on because you don't really have any other better alternative options. That's why development is so important. And that's why his former team and the Brewers continue to impress, because every year they manage to find a way with a rotation that they build plenty in-house, add a veteran like Jose Quintana, make sure you have an ace and a Freddie Peralta, a great supporting cast and Brandon Woodruff, among others, and you go out and you carve up batters every single day of the week. That is what Stearns is trying to build, and the Mets have a good foundation there already internally. I've been saying this for the past couple months now, but they need to obviously blossom the way that we hope, and the Mets need to make sure that they have enough of a cushion, knowing they're in a win-now stage, to not rely on every single one of those rookie right-handers to be the guy next year. So the same way we talk about Kodai Senga having uncertainty with his future, the same applies to David Peterson as well. Peterson, in my opinion, might be the most interesting starter that the Mets could part with in a deal of something of greater significance, or to then make a deal separately of significance for more of an ace-caliber starter. And this is not a slight on Peterson. He's our most reliable starter outside of Clay Holmes right now. But we know what his ceiling is at the same time. And you're probably not going to be able to part ways with him at much greater value than where he's currently at this point in his career. So you just do have to wonder, does David Stearns get creative at all with parting ways with a current starter or multiple that are under club control heading into the next season? Because as of now, the Mets have 8 starters that are in line to be a part of this rotation. Before even adding anybody, they already have 8 starters set and ready to go to compete or to already be a lock in this rotation. Now let's get to some of the donations here, and then let's continue on the live show, everybody. Let's see here with the donos. Give me 1 second. Okay, let's go here. Let's see. Peter, Wardy, watching again all the way from Australia. Thank you for everything once again during the season. Appreciate it. Looking forward to more. Thank you so much, my guy. I appreciate that. Wishing you and your family the best from Australia. That's really cool. Fun little fact. I became friends with someone who's in the fragrance industry actually this summer, back when I was in LA, who is also from Australia. So it was really cool kind of getting to pick her brain on the differences and how the way of life is for you guys there versus how it is, say, here in the States. It was a really cool conversation I had. But Peter, thank you so much for the donation. Wishing you well. Peter, the other Peter with the $5 holla says, I think the Mets should go after Kyle Schwarber, break that Phillies core up, and I hope Vientos isn't the Mets' first backup plan. Yeah, I don't disagree with you there. I would love for the Mets to go after Schwarber more for that DH role, if possible. I've been longing to see the Mets try to kick the teeth in on the Phillies to make a drastic signing like that. Is there risk involved to invest on a DH like Schwarber coming off of a career kind of season in a walk year, knowing that he's not going to be a good defender at all? He's a true DH, true and true. Yeah, for sure. And there's pros and cons to it, but I'm leaning more on the pros than I am the cons currently. Dave with a $5 holla says, sign Pete, Diaz, and Schwarber, get a competent veteran starter, improve bullpen. I don't really disagree with anything you just said there, my friend. The only thing I would say is, I don't need the starter to be a veteran. I just want him to be more ace-like. I would love if the Mets can get a controllable ace caliber starter, or a starter that has ace upside the way that we know McClain obviously does, because he's been dazzling every time out there. And guys, we're getting closer to 200 likes here in the live show, so thank you guys kindly for hitting that like and subscribe on your way and help us get there. Continuing on with the David Stearns remarks, this is what he has to say in regards to these young starters and McClain, Sproat, and Tom.
How do you envision the roles of McClain and Sproat and Tong going into next season right now?
But all three of those guys, I think, demonstrated that they can pitch at the major league level. At various points, all three of them pitched very well at the major league level. We'll see what our roster looks like when we get to Port St. Lucie. But I would certainly expect all three to have a role in the major leagues at some point next year. Don't know exactly when, but I think those guys should be really proud of what they accomplished this year.
How do you envision the roles of McClain and
So him not committing to them being in the rotation next year does have you wondering a little bit. Again, could one of these guys be parted with? Also makes you think about, okay, they didn't all have the best immediate success. That could go in hand with maybe just not being fully committal as to if they will have a role in this rotation to begin the season. But reaffirming that they will be all impacting the team, I think, is notable as well. Where isn't me or are most Mets fans' secondary pick of choice always the Mariners? Look at me, for example, because I've been seeing every Mets fan on social media. Yeah, I'm rooting for the Mariners hard. It's hard not to root for a Mariners team that hasn't won their division since 2001, and a team that really doesn't know success. As those Mets fans who don't know success well, we can sympathize with an opposing fan base such as theirs that falls in a similar category, if not worse. So, yeah, I have the Mariners bandwagon full steam ahead, as I do with the Red Sox. And if I have to be completely honest, I don't have a justified reason for Boston. I'm not a fan of any Boston team. I usually despise them, but we've always had this kind of Red Sox-Mets bond because of our mutual hatred for the Yankees, as well as my honestly admiration for Fenway Park and aspects of the Red Sox organization. I like a lot of the youth movement that they have. I loved how well they were in being aggressive for Garrett Crochet and besting the Mets. The Mets could have traded for Crochet, but we didn't have as many assets that would have been as appealing, I think, as what the Red Sox were able to offer, as they had the best farm in baseball at the time. I would say Red Sox and Mariners are my teams. Every other team, I quite literally really could not care less what happens with them. If I care, it's more in a negative connotation than it is a positive, because I'm wishing the worst on the Phillies, the Dodgers, to a degree the Padres, etc. I say to a degree with the Padres because I have really good friends that are in the Padres sphere, and I don't hate the Padres too much. I love Petco Park, love San Diego, just hate the fact that the Padres have been a problem for the Mets in recent years. Thank you for those donations, though, from all you guys. Mike with the $2 holla, too. Thank you. Really appreciate that. Let's continue on. David Stearns says, in regards to Steve Cohen,
last year at this time, obviously, your team was coming off of a high, and a lot of faith had been built in your administration.
Wardy, I only read donations NYM. Yes, my friend, when we have a live show set up where I have to break down and respond to not only a bunch of comments, as is, but getting into all aspects of what the entire show is about, which is about hearing what Stearns has to say and replying to it, it's not easy to answer hundreds of people's comments when we have hundreds of people in here. That's why donations are prioritized, because they're going out of their way to spend their hard-earned money on me. The least I can do is make sure that I'm at least able to reply to those people first as a priority, and then get to as many other people as I can when I make a section at the end of every single live show of 10 to 20 plus minutes to answer specifically people's comments, questions, and concerns. If you're new here, you might not know that, but I have a sneaky suspicion that you're not, so you most certainly should. As we continue on, let's go back to what David had to say.
Last year at this time, obviously, your team was coming off of a high, and a lot of faith had been built in your administration for this. It feels like a lot of that has been lost. Do you feel that, and do you feel any of it from the owner of the team, from Steve Cohen?
I think Steve expects excellence from our organization. we did not display excellence this year, and we've got to do better.
Last year at this time, obviously, your team was
All right. Simple to the point from David. Talking about Clay Holmes having a successful season. This was Andy with the recap that we'll play briefly, and then there's a couple more remarks I want to share from David Stearns and reply to, and then we will leave it all open to you guys to answer comments, questions, and concerns, wrap up the show.
Said this was his roster. David Stearns on Monday did what anyone in a leadership position has to do at a time of scrutiny or disappointment, or even in this case, for a team and its fans, heartbreak. He sat there, he took the tough questions, and he put the accountability on himself. He said this was his roster, so any failure of that roster points right to him. That's admirable. And he then went on to dissect what went wrong and what they can do about it going forward. First of all, the issue here with the Mets was not one of leadership. Carlos Mendoza is coming back. That's the right move. It was an issue of run prevention.
I don't fully agree with, that leadership wasn't an issue at all. You can't have this much of a failure of a season without there clearly being a miss in leadership or voice. One of the two. So you could say that maybe Mendy himself wasn't at heavy blame, even though he will take the blame there. But it needs to be universal blame across the board on the lack of voice for a team that was never able to get over that hump. And it goes beyond just player personnel as well, because we know this team had enough talent this season to, at minimum, be better than what they were.
In that roster, they didn't have enough pitching. They didn't have enough quality defenders. The Milwaukee Brewers, of course, the team that Stearns made his reputation building, excel at run prevention, both in pitching and defense. And Stearns knows that that's the goal, to build that here in New York, and he knows that that hasn't happened yet. He thinks it can happen as soon as next year. Frankly, they were supposed to be here already, and they were quite unpleasantly surprised by where they were in those arenas this year. Going forward, they, of course, have some beloved stars in Pete Alonso and Edwin Diaz, who are almost certainly headed to free agency. It's very uncertain what the team is going to do with those guys, and more broadly with their overall roster construction as they look to get more athletic, as they look to become better defenders. It's going to be a situation where they have to look at each individual player and decide, is this the type of player that we want going forward? I don't think there are many guys on this roster who are going to be free from that kind of scrutiny as the Mets really do their autopsy here over the next days and weeks over what went wrong and how they can address this going forward and make sure that it doesn't happen again. All options, pretty much it seems, are on the table.
And knowing that all options are on the table is encouraging in the sense that the Mets should not have nearly the same level of stubbornness in their way of thinking and philosophy that, we have to go about things this way in order for it to be the right decision. Because as Stearns stated himself, going back to his presser today, there are many things that he can learn from and adjust moving forward. And let's hear a little bit more on David with some of these remarks, guys. This will be a little bit of a longer show than I anticipated today, but for a good reason. We won't be here too long because I want to answer some of your questions, comments, and concerns too before I get out of here. Paul, the $2 donation, thank you so much. He says, does Pete need to play 162, play 120, and DH 42? I don't hate that idea, but that's with the assumption that Alonso is a New York Met next season, which we have yet to find out.
Mike.
David, how about the coaching staff? Do you think there'll be changes there?
We're going to go through an evaluation of our entire coaching staff. We'll do that over the course of coming days to a week, and then we'll make our decisions there.
And if you could go back to the trade deadline right now, knowing what you know now, what do you think you would do differently?
We don't get redos. We don't get do-overs in this business. But clearly the moves we made at the trade deadline, or at least a subset of those moves, didn't work. And in certain cases made us worse and didn't help us down the stretch.
What was the biggest surprise of that, or disappointment?
Well, look, I'm not going to every player we acquired was a true pro, worked their tails off, and did everything in their power to help us. And in a couple cases, it didn't work. And frankly, that too is on me and us. When we bring players in here, we got to set up an environment to allow them to succeed. We take a lot of pride in that. I take a lot of pride in that. And clearly at the deadline, we were unable to do that.
Manny?
You mentioned just the defensive side, how poorly was played toward the end of the season.
That's an area where we got to get better.
Tony?
Just two follow-ups on what's already been asked. One, why is Carlos Mendoza the right person going forward?
Yeah, I believe Carlos has all the same traits and assets that I believed in when we hired him 2 years ago. And I think over the course of his tenure here, he has demonstrated that. We had a tough year this year. There's no question. We are all disappointed. We are all frustrated. Mendy as much or more than anyone else. But I still believe he's a very good manager, and I think he's going to demonstrate that.
And two, just regarding the trade deadline, I mean, looking back, to what extent do you regret not acquiring a starting pitcher, even if that might have meant giving up a prospect that you clearly didn't want to give up?
So look, I think holistically, as I look at our pitching staff, we needed to do more over the course of the season. That is very clear. What we were faced at the deadline, I think our fan base would actually be perhaps even more upset if we had made some of those moves. But the entirety of our run prevention unit was not good enough this year.
Will?
Hey, David, going forward, what do you see as the most fixable thing for this club?
Yeah, I mean, I'll keep harping on run prevention. Like that is where we fell short this year. It's where we need to get better. I think we will. I think that improvement can come both internally and externally. I very much believe in our player development apparatus. I believe we're developing very good pitchers. I think we're going to continue to do that, and that's going to continue to be an emphasis.
Just even over the offseason, you went short-term with starting pitchers, and then you did not trade for one at the deadline. Has this season changed your philosophy at all when it comes to external acquisitions on the starting pitching front?
I think we have to be open to everything. I think my continued emphasis is doing everything we can to support our development infrastructure and developing starting pitchers. Ultimately, that is where we're going to have sustained success and get to the organization a consistently good spot from a run prevention perspective. But going into this offseason, I'm not gonna take anything off the table.
Joel?
Dave, a few things. In your opening statement, you said we have to learn from this. What did you learn from this for moving forward?
Yeah, I think on a number of levels, there are areas where we can probably be a little bit more proactive, and I can be a little bit more proactive. I think some of these lessons we're still investigating and still fully understanding various aspects of our team. But there are clearly times in the season, times over the offseason where I can be a little bit more proactive.
Can you dig down on that? What does that mean to be proactive in what areas and what way?
I'm not going to get into specific transactions, specific forms of transactions, but there are areas where maybe we can get a little bit more aggressive.
And just maybe I'm using a different term, just the last thing is a sense of urgency about, like you said, some of those trades might have made your fans even sicker about it. It feels like to get the free agent you might want or get the trade you might want, there needs to be some irrationality. Do you work in one of those marketplaces where there needs to be some irrationality and maybe even more than you're comfortable with?
Yeah, I think urgency is the right word. I do think urgency is the right word. And I think we have demonstrated that at points. In the free agent market, we have demonstrated senses of urgency. Frankly, I think in the trade market at points we demonstrated a sense of urgency. Certainly at the trade deadline we did. We didn't acquire players that ultimately, or in certain cases, we didn't acquire players that performed well here. And so clearly that did not work. But I think urgency is a very fair word.
So again, everybody, if you want to check out the presser in its entirety, because there's still easily another 20 plus minutes of this, just head over to SNY's YouTube channel or the Mets YouTube channel or their socials. They have all that there. And I'm seeing the comments from you guys saying, you know, oh, this is just, you know, normal jargon, yada, yada, yada. Listen, he's going to be always speaking in a certain kind of manner. However, this is without a doubt the most straightforward of a presser that Stearns has ever had, as someone who does everything in his power to not to really show any cards. You have to bear in mind for him to not only hold himself accountable, but make note of, you know, we should be more proactive, those kind of things, knowing when it comes to the trade deadline, knowing when it comes to calling up the prospects probably a little bit sooner, mainly McLean at least. You know, being smarter when your entire rotation goes down with injury in a week span and actually act upon it instead of just sitting on your hands the way that we called out for so long, you know. And I had a lot of people, and Pan, I will get to that after. Thanks so much for mentioning. I had a lot of people throughout the course of this season give me hell, give me flack by saying, Wardy, why are you going so hard and not entrusting David Stearns' decision here? It's because I get it. We're supposed to have faith in what our president decides and does, but when we watch in real time things not work for an extended period of time, by God, I'm going to call it out. How can I not as a fan? The same way that you're going to go ahead and yell at your television or yell at me while you're watching my live stream because maybe you disagree with a take of mine. Maybe you're calling me a lot of heinous things, and that's okay. I don't blame you half the time. Still getting to the point of this man is far from perfect. He too has been making mistakes. He's recognizing that he's making these mistakes, and he needs to make sure that he avoids them moving forward. And he's not going to hit on everything. He's going to have misses as we head into next season, no doubt about it. But if he can not only show his ability to be aggressive, be proactive, that paired with a scorched earth Steve Cohen, who's more pissed off than anyone else on the planet with the Mets not being a playoff team this year, I think it's going to bode for a very eventful and entertaining offseason. It's going to have its drags for sure. I'm not saying the Mets are going to completely blow this thing up, but what I am saying is buckle up, because this team will not at all look the same heading into next season. And there will be people that we have loved and appreciated in this organization that will not be here anymore. That is just the matter of fact, and that's the right move, even if those players go on to have plenty of success elsewhere. And what I'm saying by that is as follows. If the Mets do not have Pete Alonso return, while I will sincerely miss him, and while I would hate to see him do well elsewhere, it doesn't change the fact that I'm going to be really, really upset, but understandable that they are moving forward without him. I don't think if the Mets lose out on Alonso, we're going to look at this in the way that we looked at Daniel Murphy going to the Nationals. I could be completely wrong in saying that, but that's just how I feel. And I think it's an easier way to stomach and feel that way when you've not won at all with this core group. And this is not on Alonso, because he has not at all been the fault this year. He was very much one of the lone positives that you saw from this team in certain stretches. But when we talk about the voice, when we talk about holding people accountable, he has been here longer than most. He's been here as long as McNeil. Jeff's been here, you know, maybe a smidge longer, around the same time. Brandon Nimmo's been here longer than anyone else. You would think that with those kind of guys in this locker room, that there would have been more of a change in that clubhouse. But no, at least not what we know publicly. And that in itself is frustrating when you look at the aspects of this team that just did not work out yet again this year. And I know Alonso's not viewed or supposed to be, say, the unsung leader of this team, but you do expect more out of him than maybe what we know, what has been relayed in the public eye to this point. So do I hope Alonso returns? Yes. But do I think we can hopefully take a step in the right direction even if we part ways with him? Yes. I think that's definitely a possibility too. Can we get rid of Lindor's smile? No, we're not going to get rid of Lindor's smile. There's nothing wrong with it. And yeah, the article with The Athletic, we will talk about more in content tomorrow for sure. But yeah, some players supposedly not having the most raving reviews about Mendy this year is overly shocking. I mean, I think Mark Vientos' comments leading up to the trade deadline was a great example as to maybe how there was a lapse in communication from the coaching staff to the players. He stated how basically no one really helped him at all with his struggles throughout the season. No one really kind of went out of their way to do so because there's an expectation with a win-now team. And while there is an expectation, there's also an understanding where if you're a young, vulnerable player, you probably are just hoping to maybe get some guidance where he likely got last year with a JD Martinez, but was missing that this year and did not have anyone to lean on to the same degree or same regard as he did a year ago. So we'll definitely talk more about what those remarks are in regards to Carlos Mendoza and what he needs to do right as a manager. But in the meantime, David Stearns needs to get his head out of his derriere. He needs to put up this season, off season, and not shut up. And we need to see this team make changes of significance. If that doesn't happen, we're going to be going through another year of torment and frustration together that I really do not want to sign up for. You know, I cover every single game. I've been through hell and back with this team like each and every one of you the past 5 years under Cohen. We've seen more losing than winning. I would really like to see some sustained winning for a change. Like, all I'm asking is for back-to-back seasons of being a very good team. Is that too much to ask for? Unfortunately, 5 years into Steve Cohen, yeah, that is too much to ask for. And who had that on their bingo card from the day that Steve Cohen in 2021 stated that he anticipates the Mets to win a championship in his first 3 to 5 years in Flushing, Queens. Now we head into year 6 with 3 losing seasons out of 5 and try to make sure that it doesn't get worse, but instead starts to get better. With that being said, everybody, that is going to do it for tonight's live show. I would like to thank everyone so much, to everybody that took the time to chime in live on a replay. I sincerely appreciate every single one of you. There are more things that can be said in regards to David Stearns' remarks today, which is why I implore you guys to check it all out when you guys get a chance. Really do appreciate it. I will be here tomorrow. We will have a new video dropping, as well as probably another live show in the evening, barring changes. So be on the lookout for it, because there's going to be a lot of things coming out daily with this Mets team on players that'll be, extending, accepting their options for their contracts, opting out more, and everything else in between. You guys know the drill. If you don't, let me enlighten you. We cover every aspect of the Mets offseason. So from coaching staff changes to inevitable fires that are happening that we will reaffirm once they actually happen in the coming days, as well as the other aspects of the roster that'll be ever changing, along with eventually when we get down the line in winter meetings and all that stuff. Like, we will cover every aspect. We are going to be covering rumors all the time when it's warranted. We're not there yet, but we're really close because the offseason is upon us. So rest assured, make sure you guys are tapped into all the content all offseason long. And thank you guys again so much for every single one of your guys' support. All right, guys, have a great night. The Mets may be out of it, but at least you can breathe, take a deep breath. It's over. You don't have to be in pain anymore. And we can look ahead to what will be a lengthy offseason, but hopefully, fingers crossed, hopefully, an important one, a significant one, an eventful one for this Mets team. Have a good night, everybody.